Welcome everyone. This is Michael Velzo, Beth Crittenden, and Ginny Kuhel here talking about small business. We're a part of the small business consulting series. We're talking about cash flow strategy today. We will look to go through a few introductory slides, give a little bit of hints and tips on what we're seeing out there as some benefits to enhance your cash flow strategy. I think we've got three great minds here in HR, financial wellness, and myself. I do wealth management work, but we work with a lot of small businesses on this exact area. So I will pass it along. We'll go to the next slide here. Beth, I'll go ahead and pass it to you on this.
Yeah, awesome. So sometimes as a financial wellness coach and a cash flow consultant, I hear people having stress over things such as, I don't have enough money, the business is running out of money, I need to earn more money. Yes, and when we bring in these aspects to the financial goals, it makes them measurable. So some businesses also now are kicking themselves that they didn't have more savings. So some people will present to me and say, all right, we're at least partially open again. We have some cash flow coming in and I need to save more money. So that's a great starting point. Then we want to work through these aspects of the type of goal that we can measure and track over time. I've also heard sometimes businesses say, okay, well, the first part of 2020 is screwed. I want to stick with our goals and squeeze into the last half of the year what we lost earlier in the year. So part of that is bringing in this realistic aspect, the R in SMART. Is it going to be realistic? I find this sometimes helps when small business leadership is communicating to employees or clients to be able to be clear. A lot of people out there are saying, I want to help small businesses. A small business can either say, yeah, we need help, we're really struggling, or they can say, if we were to get $100 from 10 of our clients, we would be able to cover our rent for X amount of time. And that makes it more actionable.
I think that's great. I think as we kind of move along, I think, looking at cash flow analysis, for most businesses, I think that along the point of having that measurable goal, I think leads us to, if a small business can really set themselves up for success by getting those SMART goals in front of them so that they know what to do. The next, to me, most actionable is looking at cash flow analysis. And I think there's kind of three parts to this. I think really reviewing, and I'll definitely pass it along to you, Beth, but I think reviewing, what they have, looking to dive in there and figure out what they need to adjust potentially, and then having that as an ongoing task is definitely what we see as being successful. So what are your thoughts?
Yep. I want to make sure people know about the profit first cash flow system. I highly recommend it. A guy named Mike Michalowicz discovered this. He has books. He has a whole organization that is set up around small businesses being able to know, are they on target or not? And an exercise I encourage small business owners to do, and Jenny, if you have any questions about this for your business in particular too, please feel free to let me know and jump in. Michael, you too, if you want to, but an initial exercise just to take your own temperature of where you are in terms of understanding your income and expenses. Write down, if you had to guess, what percentage of your income do particular expense categories take up? Take your best guess with that. So Of course, the 100% is the amount of income. Sometimes it's helpful to do that for a month of time. Some businesses are better served by doing that quarterly. I think doing it annually is probably a little bit too much data. So either monthly or quarterly, but you take your best guesses. What percentage of my income do I think goes towards paying me as the business owner? What percentage do I guess goes towards income taxes? What percentage goes towards tax deductible professional expenses to make the business keep running? And what percentage goes towards savings? Sometimes what people guess is very instructive for what they assume is happening with the business finances. Then it's so relatively easy to find out what the percentages are. And when you can compare what was your guess with what's actually happening, that can be very enlightening. Jenny.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you're mentioning, is Mike McAllister, is that correct?
Mike McAllowitz.
Oh, Kalowitz. Okay. You're asking about making a good guess and then what the actuality. What if the small business owner struggles to do this? It's not on the top I want to get done to do. What is your suggestion on how to put this as a priority, or is there someone that could help? Let's take me. Just sit down and think about my finances and what I'm sorry, that's going to be at the bottom of my list. I know, but that's me. So what would you suggest for me to get it higher up to the top of my list?
That's a great question. You could start with making your guesses. And you could do that in a minute or less. So then when the question comes in, I don't feel like doing that. The question can be, am I willing to take a minute on this to just start it? Sometimes breaking it into really micro steps is what has me go. Like maybe you put it on a piece of paper that you don't throw away after you've done it, and just see if you get curious. Like, I have my guesses here. See if a part of you goes, well, now I really want to know what the answers are. See if you can. What I love about bookkeeping and looking at numbers and figuring out what narrative story are my numbers telling me, it can feel like a little detective search. So that, to me, it adds a little bit of intrigue. If I can take the time to, let's say, watch a clip on YouTube about a mystery or something like that, can I apply that to my own business and get curious about it?
Getting curious.
I would say too, to jump in on this, I think one of the things that I've seen is successful is, you're right that a lot of business owners, they're passionate about doing what they're good at. I'll take the example of a construction firm that we work with. The owner does not want to look at this, but that exercise that Beth mentioned, it gets him engaged in the process, because he's thinking, I guarantee the minute that he sees what he assumes vary from what the actuality is, his engagement level does go up. I've seen it happen where, wait a minute, I'm spending money on this. How can I adjust this? And it does lead to enhancing those areas that are profit centers, eliminating ones that may not be, and looking for replacements or adjustments, to really refine what they're doing. And I think this right now, at this time, is probably one of the most crucial times for a lot of these businesses to do this analysis in order to be able to really thrive as they get through it. I think a lot are getting through this, but they really want to take market share. They really want to make sure their business, is foundationally strong. And I think this exercise to me is one that they do it. And I think working with either their internal, resources, their accounting or bookkeeping resources, or looking outwards and saying, who can I bring in to help me with this. This might be a good thing for us to look at. So hopefully that helps. I'll move along and I'll pass it right back to you, Beth, and let me know if, I probably said some of this, but
Sure. No, this is great. The semantics here are important. I definitely encourage business owners to, an important principle in my work is, if I don't understand something about finances, or if something's kind of fuzzy, I want to run it through my own test of, could I explain this to an 11-year-old? I want it to be really simple. So can I explain profit to an 11-year-old? This is where, when I really simplify it and when I really kind of demystify it for myself, it sometimes helps me answer some of my own questions. I see with small businesses, sometimes they stick with just the gross income number at the top without factoring in on their profit and loss report, well, what's it costing me to generate this amount of gross income? So if I look and I see that I'm bringing in 10,000 in a month and it's costing the business 8,000, that's really significant. I would rather generate 5,000 and pay 1,000 to generate it. That's a greater net profit. So it does take an element of bookkeeping, and it doesn't have to be that the small business owner does it. It does need to be that someone does it, because if I only look at bank statements alone, it doesn't give me the full translation. But looking at bank statements are an awesome start, especially if somebody's saying, I know I've needed to do this, I'm behind on this, where do I even start? Pulling out a bank statement, knowing about yourself, am I going to concentrate better if I print it out and look and hold actual pieces of paper in my hand? Or is it okay for me to look at an electronic copy of the bank statement and cruise through? Almost everyone I work with definitely goes, oh, I'm being charged for that? Wait, why did they charge me twice for that? Just looking at the statement can be grounding and clarifying. And you can decide for yourself how far back you want to go if you're getting started with getting a little more into the tracking.
Move us along here. I think that kind of leads to refinement, and we look at this. I think that, I use the example of a construction firm we work with, and one of the things that they realized, and I was thinking of them as we were looking at these slides, is a lot of it was trying to refine the overhead, the fixed costs, they were able to look at this and they went, well, two of them, they were able to, they looked at the vendor contracts and they could actually refine those a little bit better, which increased that margin of profitability. They were actually able to renegotiate a lease of one of their yards that way increased their margin. And some of their equipment leases, on their fleet vehicles that they use, same thing. And so just kind of looking at this and realizing that there was flexibility, I think that as a small business owner, I think really getting to know the numbers a little bit better, even if it's just a little bit, to take a little bit more ownership, but then realize there can be flexibility, especially in times like this, to really go in there and move things around and refine them, I think, to me, is a very important piece of this. It's just picking up the phone. A lot of times these, a small business owner is most likely wearing the hat of sales or negotiation at some point. This is just further to that, to refine those internal processes. So,
and it can be so good for the business also to think ahead if they have gotten a PPP or an EIDL, to look ahead. Like I just learned the other day that an equipment lease at least counts on the rent part of loan forgiveness and that 25% part of forgiveness for the PPP. So getting clear on those details can really help change how businesses are going to come out of this. And of course, I've also noticed the smaller a vendor company is, sometimes the greater flexibility they have. I've reached out for some of my business clients and I've had mixed results with being able to reduce some of those expenses, but then at least we know. Refining it doesn't have to mean that I beat my head against the wall until we are spending less money on that as a business. It means I know, okay. And then I also can, let's say company X is proving to be terrible throughout this, and I can't get them on the phone, or they give me just a gobbledygook response. Noted. I might want to look at, can I refine my overhead by changing who I'm working with and find a place that can support my business better?
Which I think leads us to a subject near and dear to all three of us, which is we all serve roles as support to small businesses. So I think this is an exact moment where people really need to look and identify who's on their team. You know, who are they working with on the financial side? Who are they bringing in on the HR consulting side? Who are they bringing in to work with benefits and 401k? They should be looking and identifying these members of their support team. And just like they might look at that, who they're getting their utilities from, and if they can't renegotiate, they might look at moving to a utility company that has better, you know, maybe they move their internet technology over to another company because of that. I think their support team needs to also be evaluated and just make sure, you know, who are they is the first step to me. I think we've got kind of the main one, you know, there's a whole list. We could go through a litany. I think it's a good exercise for small business owners to really understand who they are working with. Sometimes it's not always top of mind, but they can go through the list, you know, payroll companies and HR consulting, bookkeepers, you know, folks that are financial experts, maybe the PEOs they're working with, like ADP, Paychex, TriNet, their insurance brokerages. It's kind of that first step to me is identification. And then the next step to me is really benchmarking the performance. You know, are we responsive? Are we picking up the phone? Are we easy to work with? You know, is it something to where they're getting what, you know, are we somebody that really are delivering on the promise? You know, that to me is very important. You know, if there are vendors that are not, if there are support team members that are out there that are really, they're not picking up the phone the whole times or 2 hours, or, you know, you're really not getting the value for what you're looking for, you need to reevaluate and reevaluate those relationships. So what I would pass it to both of you to kind of tell me your own experiences on where you think small businesses should really look at with this.
Jenny, do you want to take that one?
Well, when you're talking about are they responsive and easy to work with, my whole thing in working with small businesses and what I always like to promote is good customer service and making sure that you are checking in with your clients and people. And it doesn't have to be like, it's just like, how are you? Just thinking about you. It doesn't have to be a sales. It's just clients right now, because we're so isolated, is they want to know that somebody's saying hello. And I send emails to a lot of my clients just saying, how are you doing? How's the family doing? You know, how's your dog? If I know they have animals, are you getting out for a walk? Nothing about me. Or, you know, and then in time I'll say, okay, well, if you have an HR question, then let me know. Again, for me, delivering on your promises, if you promise, just personally, if you promise me something and I don't get it, I'm not going to be wanting to work with that business for very long. Now, sometimes there's exceptions, but I used to always say, under promise, over deliver. So if you can't get that to them by Friday or whatever, don't tell them Friday. Tell them Monday, and then if you can, get to them on Friday. That's kind of how I like to work. I don't want to always go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. I'm sorry, late. It doesn't work for me or my clients or who's working with me. So.
Jenny, I liked what you said before we started recording as well. You said your two things are HR and fun. And
Mhm.
I feel that way about what I do too. I know
Yes.
sometimes people say, oh, I'm sorry to give you this, and I hate bookkeeping. I don't want to do it, and things like that. Most of us, I can speak for the three of us here, we're in business doing what we do because we actually enjoy it.
Right.
So I'm glad to be that weirdo money nerd who actually enjoys the spreadsheets and the software, and it's a great fit for me. It's really good. So I think sometimes people hold back from reaching out to working with a vendor because they wouldn't want to do it themselves, which is a nice impulse, but I would encourage people to know help is definitely there. And I've seen also there's been a kind of a contraction where when people have had to furlough employees or lay off employees, suddenly if there was more space for the business owner to work on the business instead of working in the business so much, I know a lot of people are a little more pinched now that they're needing to work in the business more than they did before. So I know looking at sort of what's it going to cost me time-wise if I just do it versus can I find that amount of expense in our overall cash flow view to go ahead and bring in some help, even if it's short term.
And I totally agree with you. I mean, technology isn't my best forte. So I realized I was spending so much time trying to learn how to do a website and put buttons on it. I hired an intern from Dominican University. I've had them for several years. They're absolutely fabulous. I just call them up. It's so worth it. And then I have time to build my business. And that's my tagline is let me handle your HR needs so you can build the business. Well, I finally took my own advice,
Nice.
So it was like, exactly. And I'm hiring bookkeepers because I don't do it. And I struggle with it. So I love people who do it and the finance part because it's just not my forte.
I think too, one of the things that we hear a lot, at least on my side of the coin, we work with folks on their benefits and retirement plans and commercial insurance, and not things that a lot of the business owners necessarily want to go in, great detail on. They want to just work with trusted people. And I think sometimes what I hear frequently is, how is this? I ask them, how is your relationship with your current, retirement plan advisor? And they say, it's not great. They never pick up the phone and it seems to be working okay. And I say, well, there's better solutions out there. Let's go out and maybe we can reevaluate, maybe we can find a solution where they provide some better education and they're responsive and they're all like that. It's not true. There are resources that are out there that, the folks will be responsive. They will pick up the phone. They'll provide education and be easy to work with. They will deliver what they say. And that leads to trust, which then leads to a long-term relationship, whether it be your payroll service, someone you're working with HR, your bookkeeper, your financial, expert like Beth, that's how you get those people on your team, is to look outside and realize that they're not all like some of the large institutions that are out there,
right,
that you're just a number. So I hope people do look at this and go, you know what, there is something better out there. I've got to look out and do maybe a little bit of legwork just to network through my trusted resources and find other, solutions. That to me is more the refinement and replacement of these elements of a small business. And this is a great time to do it. They may be busy and they may be in the trenches, like you said, Beth, working, in and on the business at this point, but this is a great time to do it. Especially if they've got things they may need to tweak. I really, this one we can talk about. I put some cost benchmarks on there in terms of, is there transparency in cost? I think sometimes business owners are not entirely sure what they're paying for. I think I know that the three of us, it's very transparent. You know, someone asks, how much is it going to be to consult, do HR consulting? You're very forthright with that. Same thing, Beth and I, we're putting that in front of them and being very realistic. That's definitely not the case industry-wide in the areas we work in. There can be a lot of non-transparency. So I think it's important for business owners to really get a handle. It goes back on that cost analysis, that cash flow analysis. What am I paying for? I think they should review this regularly and make sure that it's in line with the industry standards, and they're not, it's not fluctuating or going up and down. We've seen that costs are rising. We've seen some increases, especially on the insurance side, that people don't realize until they do go back and do a little bit of that numbers crunching, that, oh my gosh, my insurance went up 60, 70% in certain cases. Why didn't I catch that? But that can really be the difference of paying the rent this month or not. So I think just a little bit more, dig a little deeper and get into the numbers, or bring in somebody that can help you with that. As a small business, I think it's necessary. So any thoughts on this before I go to the next slide, or just?
Yeah, I'd like to just add quickly that people may have seen that we're presenting this through Mindful Life, Mindful Work. And part of what we're talking about is conscious awareness in action, just when it comes to numbers. So sometimes people can be familiar with having a growth practice or an awareness practice as if it's something to do outside of work. Ginny, I'm thinking about for you, you said, I don't want to do this. What's going to make me actually do this? Sometimes when people can say, okay, I'm going to take 5 conscious breaths and try to just sit my little fanny in the chair and hold still and ground, it can go, oh, I'm growing now. Now I'm going to look at some of the numbers and put it in that space of, this does not have to be torture for me. This does not have to be like a kid sitting in a timeout chair. This can be something where I'm breathing, I'm making sure my body's relaxed, making sure I have something nice to drink with me, and bringing in that kindness into the process. I definitely wanted to highlight that too.
Thank you. That's great points, Beth, because I think one other point that you meant was chunking it for individuals who don't like doing a certain thing. Like, there's not a lot of people who want to do human resources or, write their handbooks. But if you chunk it, it's the same thing. Let's just take a little piece of it at a time. And I should think about that with the finance. If I sit for 5 minutes, you can almost do anything for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and then you time it. And if you don't want to do it, and I do this for other things, it's called mini habits. And I can't remember the author. He's fabulous. 5 minutes. And if I don't want to do it after that, that's fine. And it works. So yes. Great points. Thank you.
I think that's great. I think the actionable change, I think is something to where a lot of these little steps add up to meaningful change. And I think that doing some of this, while it may look, for business owner, going in there, getting to understand some profit centers and refinement, looking at some of that overhead and renegotiation, deepen some relationships with the members of their support team. All of these types of things, to me, really culminate into change. By doing that, small changes, even if it's just getting a better understanding of what that is. That first exercise, Beth, that you mentioned. Just what do I assume is happening? What really is happening? Just that first, kind of realization and really mindfulness on what, an intention of what they're doing will lead to this change. And I think the biggest thing that I always tell people that I think is important is they need to keep it going. It's good to do it once, but it needs to become a practice. It needs to, even if it's something to where it's maybe once a quarter I sit down, or maybe once a month, or maybe it's few times a year. It just needs to be done, with a little bit of regularity, get a little rhythm to it, because that's when a lot of the culminated change will really magnify and help. So at least for me, I think that this big picture view is where I see the most change occur.
I want to add with my financial wellness coaching hat on as well. If your mind is saying, I don't have time to do this, I can't do this, a powerful question to ask yourself is, am I running the business or is the business running me? Sometimes when people start to look at their finances, it seems like the spreadsheet or the bank statement or what have you is like fussing at them, or it's just what our mind does with it. So the practice that Michael is talking about, we get to deepen our sense of empowerment if we want to. So the mind may say, I don't have time for this. The mind may say, this sounds like the most boring thing. I'm going to go stick a fork in my eye instead. And that may all be true. Most of us have different parts of ourselves that will present opinions. I feel what we're offering people, and what's an important part of what I've learned as a small business owner myself, is I'd like to be in choice. I want to have maximum choice when it comes to where I put my attention. And I know there's a level of privilege that comes with saying that. Some people are working their butts off to put food on the table for their kids. Deep bow to that. Totally respect that. And even in that situation, I'm able to step back, be grounded, and find the willingness within myself to say, maybe there's a way I can make these numbers go even better than they already are.
I think those are great
Good
points. I think, I think those are great points. Ginny, did you have anything to add?
Not at that moment. I think for me, it's just, for me, in listening to this, it's assisting me. I like what you said on being choice, because I avoid financing totally, and I don't want it to run me. And so there's a part of me that says, now you need to take a look at this part of your business. And that's how I can help people in my business doing human resources who don't want to do this. Not something that's a priority either, is that I can look at my own, what I call my own records in my head, and help people and sit and be grounded with them, like you do in the financing, and Michael, you're doing your business. It's fabulous. So
thank you, Jenny.
yeah.
That reminds me too, sometimes fear or shame can be very strong experiences for people. Like, you're not just not looking at your finances because you decided, you know what I think I'm going to do today is not look at my finances. It's not a goal. Usually it's not an intention.
Mm-hmm.
When fear or shame arises for people, that's when I'm hoping also that by looking at it and kind of working with what comes up in the mind, sometimes, okay, let's say I look at my monthly income for the whole business that has employees and we have goods that we need to buy and so forth. And let's say I know we need to bring in $10,000 for the month to cover our costs. And let's say this month I see $7,000. The mind may shoot off into the galaxy of, I'm a failure. What if people quit? Oh my gosh, what are people going to think about this? I can't show my business partner this. All of those things are very natural reactions. Owning a business is hard. It's why more people don't do it. And when we're really called to having a business, being a member of our community in that way, I want people to have the opportunity for their service mentality, for their ability to connect with people, for their ability, like in your case, you're an HR expert and you're fun to talk to. That's rare. I want you to be able to keep doing that. So if that means that people are able to turn down the volume a little bit on any fear or shame that arises, I totally want that experience for them. the numbers don't yell at us. Our mind interprets the numbers in a certain way. The numbers just are what they are. It's part of what I like about working with them.
I think one of the things that I would say is a question I get often, and I we're kind of in a Q&A. I'm going to put up the slide with our info here, is how do I do some of these? Ginny, you asked me earlier in our discussion here as to, how does someone go about, do they bring in a resource? They do. I think that the biggest thing to look at and being, intentional and really mindful on this is to look and make sure you bring someone in that can help get a strategic plan together. And then look at those things and say, okay, I'm here, I need to go here. How am I going to get there, and what do I need to do? What kind of things do I need to implement? Well, I need to bring Ginny in to talk about HR, and we need to tackle that. We need to bring Beth in. We need to bring Michael in. We need to, bring these resources in order to help us. There's a business owner, as was mentioned earlier, they can't do everything. They're good at what they're good at, and they really should focus on really taking their gifts and really focusing on that, but really getting the support that they need. So I would encourage anyone to reach out to us. I think all three of us will always, sit and talk to someone for 20, 30 minutes, give them guidance, see if there's a relationship in an area that we can help with. I think that's necessary. We're just a starting point. I think there's some amazing professionals here to support them. I know our networks collectively are extremely broad and deep. And so I think that everyone just needs to really reach out to one or all of us and say, hey, I have this need. Give me some help. It's not a bad thing to have reach out for a helping hand. And I really encourage anyone that owns a small business, especially at this time, to really do that, So I'll get off my soapbox.
That's okay.
A good soapbox.
It was a good soapbox. Yes.
Yeah.
And Michael, I agree with you. And I think sometimes we go in thinking we could do it by ourselves. When I first started my own business, and I was in corporate for a long time. And so I thought, oh, I know a lot of people, I'll be fine. Well, I didn't know how to run a business. And I just thought, I started reaching out. And because it was taking me too much time to do it myself. And what I call is the experts, like if I go to Beth or you do it in like 1/10 of the amount of time, so that then I have time to really deal with my clients. So yes, I totally agree with reach out to the person where their passion is, and get that passion from them. And that's what Michael and Beth, you both have. You have that passion and it comes through, and that's what's important. It's that connection.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for, I think, a wonderful discussion. Hopefully, I really think we talked about some things that will be really impactful for small business owners. I think a lot of it it's there, but I think it's really to bring it to the forefront and really, put it in front of people to go, hey, here's some things that may help. I think are really beneficial at any time. I think right now is a great time for folks to look at these things and